Welcome back to Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for the Amstel Gold Race Ladies Edition, 155 kilometers. It's actually the old style finish, the like Phil Gill World Champs Cowberg finish. I quite like it, but we'll see whether it actually induced good racing. They do repetitions, 4 laps or so of a Cowberg, Hulhemmerberg, and Bemelerberg combination. These are short, well-paved climbs, unlike their Flandrian counterparts. And yeah, they are. I mean, they're proper roads. They're just like, it's a hillier region in the south of the Netherlands near Maastricht, if my geography serves me correctly. We had an appetizer at Brabant on Wednesday, Benji, with Persico winning the sprint against Vollering. Did you think that would inform how SD Works would race today?
I think it would firstly inform how UAE would race today, as we saw UAE having the better sprinter in that group in Brabantse Pijl, in Sylvia Persico beating Demi Vollering, so maybe they would try and keep it together today and just get Persico to the Kouwberg, get her over the Kouwberg, and try and win from the group that forms after the Kouwberg. That's how I saw UAE's plan going into this race. But when it comes to SD Works, I don't know, because they've got multiple leaders that can get over the Kouwberg, eh? And if you have that situation, then you can benefit from that after. We saw it last year with Cavalli and Utrecht Ludwig both being in the group after the Kouwberg. Was it both of them after the Kouwberg? They had 2 riders after the Kouwberg, right? And then Cavalli attacked. So they benefited from the numerical advantage they had in that group. And then a rider like Persico without teammates can't really do much against that, huh?
No, and I mean, UAE and Jumbo seem to have that same strategy of just hope it's a really negative race. It all comes back together and Vos can go for a sprint and Persico can win the sprint. UAE don't really have many other options. I think it's a fine strategy if they can, she's got to be good enough. If she's not, she's not. Anyway, other teams like Canyon SRAM haven't won a big race, World Tour race for a number of years, but this really suits their riders with Paladin, Niewiadoma, and who else did Canyon SRAM? They were really, really strong today. Shabby. And their option is clearly not to be going to a group of 5 sprint with Niewiadoma. I mean, Lisa Longa Borghini wouldn't go to a group of 2 sprint with her in 2021. And then there's Movistar, who are the curious one because they're trying to make the Lippert-Van Vleuten combination work. Mackay as well is more a domestique. And yeah, Movistar is difficult to figure out. And there's no clear, okay, Lippert's the sprinter, Van Vleuten's the puncher. It's not as clear a hierarchy, whereas Vollering's the attacker. Kopecki's the sprinter here for SD Works.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to Movistar, you see that dynamic play out very early in the race because last year, I think on the Fromberg and so forth and the Kurtenberg, which lies with like 80k to go last year, Van Vleuten was already attacking. And we see that exact scenario this year where they're trying to force stuff with Van Vleuten so early because Van Vleuten knows that these climbs are a bit too short for her to be able to just fly off into the distance, Tourmalet style, perhaps at the Tour de France if her form gets to the top by then. But doing it at 80k to go, let me pull this for you.
It's way too early. It's crazy.
Yeah, 7 climbs of like 1 kilometer is not the same as a 7-kilometer climb, right?
Yes, that's correct. The 7-kilometer one is longer. Well, no, because there's rest periods. And all these climbs, they are, a lot of them put back to back, but they're not directly back to back. It's not like some of the Italian circuits where they literally descend into the next one. There's 3Ks, 4Ks. They have 5 minutes, 7 minutes rest between climbs. It's a completely different requirement, and Kopecki's just doing it easy all day. And so, yeah, I would have liked to have seen. I mean, Movistar did get Erich in the breakaway. I think the early break. Yep. That's fine. I think Paris-Roubaix was a pretty good showcase of how to beat SD Works / the Netherlands women's team, as in the Olympics. And in other races, which is all teams should be trying to overload the break except UAE with Persico, really. Even Movistar, even Jumbo-Visma. Everyone should be trying to overload the breakaway because there are not, they don't have teams of 9. Like in the Team Sky, it's teams of 6. and 2 of them are leaders. That's a lot of work for 4 riders if you have big breakaways, and you're going to put them in a more of a difficult situation, but that didn't happen. And eventually, yeah, as a counter move by Trek with Brand and Stultins on Liv, and I thought, Trek, again, Brand, big engine, she's not going to be able to follow on Final Cowberg, which is 600 meters, 9%, the hard bit. So get her up the road, and then Sprat and the other riders, like Sharon Van Anrooy, who's probably their leader based on current form, they can sit in. Totally fine. But they just weren't joined by enough riders. And also, they got 2 minutes. And this is when coverage was starting about 1 o'clock this afternoon. SD Works never seemed to have to shoulder all the load, Benji. FDJ helping them. AG Insurance are pulling for a little bit with Wollaston. Like, all these other teams are giving them a little bit of help. It's not your problem. It's like if Jonas is in yellow and a big break goes with, that's a problem, you know? Well, sometimes the men's teams also stuff it up. It's just, I would like to see the teams at least force SD Works to burn Bredevold. Burn her before the last 2 laps, because she's got to bring a 6-minute gap down to 3 minutes or 2 minutes.
Exactly. And I feel like that Ali Wollaston example exemplifies that there's a lot of this thing going on where a lot of teams have riders that won't necessarily make the final, but they come back after dropping and they probably think to themselves, if I can help my team a tiny bit by pacing at the front of the peloton, then I'm helping my team. But maybe not helping is the best way to help the team, because that might force SD Works into actually chasing and make the victory more possible than if you were helping and technically also helping SD Works. That's kind of the example that you displayed there, and we see that. But also next to that, there's also some weird things going on, like the attack with Stultins and Brand up front that happened for a bit, and we see then with like 37 kilometers to go around the Kouwberg, and Mavi Garcia's pacing on that climb, and I'm like, she's got a different shirt on, but I'm pretty sure she's still at Liv. And then we take a look at Stultins at the front, and they're both like pacing. Like, that's not ideal either, eh? Obviously, Mavi Garcia probably shouldn't be chasing her own teammate at the front, but next to that, there's also these attacks that happen where they attack at the top of climbs, where the climbs are never fully paced. Like the Kouwberg with 37 kilometers to go is not fully paced. It's like a bit of a fake tempo. Some riders are trying something at the top, but not necessarily on the climb, because they don't expect to be able to make the gap on the climb itself. But if you do it after the climb, a climb that has been semi-neutralized, people still have the energy to respond. Then you brought it up to me. Why don't these people attack in between the climbs, right?
Well, yeah, you've got Kouwberg here, 37 k's to go. Great example. Brown tries to move, closed down by UAE. Everyone's in good position. All the favorites, they're not drinking. They're on high alert. Second or third last Kouwberg, they're watching to see if serious moves are going to go. And they get over the top. The gap to the breakaway was like 8 seconds to Brandon Stultins, who were not going anywhere fast.
Yeah.
And that gap then goes out to 35 seconds. What does that tell you? Nothing happened in this phase. Between, there was a flat section before I'm going to call it the Hammerberg, and then there's the second last Kouwberg. This phase, the race, nothing, pretty much. And it's because, and I was like, this is where to anticipate if you're the other teams. This is where, and Faulkner did go later, but this is where Mackay should be moving. This is where, if Brown is going to move, she should be moving. Or Los Rarajes too, I think maybe did try something, but this is where, even a Mavi Garcia, frankly, because her teammate's done up the road, I mean, maybe she can follow, but, and Marcus, again, she had a mechanical at this time, so who knows, but I don't think Jumbo business plan was to move with a Henderson or someone, so this is where a place to put SD Works under pressure. See, Vibus was good, but see how much she can do, or at least make her burn herself.
Exactly, and we're getting to the second last Kouwberg that you're mentioning, and we've seen already that Wibbes has done quite a bit of work. She's like at the front, but not necessarily doing all the work because of the factors we just mentioned. But we get to that second last Kouwberg, and there we get like the ultimate 100-meter sprint by Loredana Wibbes into the Kouwberg. Because Brand and Stultins were caught. We're basically at the front of the race at this point, and Wibbes just sprints the first 100 meters, everybody off the wheel, and then parks it. And
Is there a Strava segment? There must be for first 100 meters Kouwberg. And she must have
Imagine.
broken the QOM by so much.
Probably. But there's also the factor that after she does that, at the top of the Kouberg, she is still in second position. And not only that,
it's 12 wide.
Yeah, exactly. Faulkner attacks at the top of the Kouberg in the same way that we just spoke about Brown doing it at the previous Kouberg. And Wiebes and Amal Yusik for Persico once again. And Wiebes closes it down the last factor as well. So it's like she has unlimited energy until after this Kouberg, because then she dropped.
But in the chase behind, and again, Van Vleuten didn't look too crash hot throughout this phase of the race. She wasn't looking that good. But like, she's never going to ride for Lippert ever. That's just, you know that. And then Brown's moved, and you think, shouldn't Ludwig try to move here? Like, is she really going to beat Kopecky in a sprint? Like,
No,
she's not. So shouldn't FDJ basically be doing what Kane Schramm? Like, the anticipating strategy is really hard to do when only one rider on the team does it. Jayco, Faulkner's really strong, but it's just her. If Brown was still on Jayco, that would be really interesting. FDJ, it's mostly just Brown. Canyon, later in this race, when Wiebes had brought them back, when you start to actually roll attacks, you will get proper separation, even when, like, and you saw, Kane Schramm rolled team attacks, Vollering was active, closing them down, and then the third or fourth one, she's like, fuck it, I cannot, before last Kouberg, respond to all of these. Paladin goes.
Exactly, and it's Paladin, Shabby, Nivyadoma, all three of them doing the attacks, and you'd say Nivyadoma in the past was the rider waiting for the last climb, but it never worked for her either, so she realizes that in the same way that Utrecht Ludwig should probably realize that that scenario doesn't really get her anywhere. And these three riders do those rolling attacks, and I think it's also Van Vleuten that when the attack of Paladin then happens, I think it's on the Bemelerberg, that she can't close the last portion, and some people were saying she clipped out and so forth. You immediately went for her legs aren't what they are supposed to be.
She has no legs.
That's, yeah, and I said she's got
none.
2 legs, but...
They're gone.
They're gone. Okay. Brown them bridges, which is what you should do, because we're now in that phase between the Bemelerberg, 9 kilometers to go, and the Kouberg, 2.3 kilometers to go, the phase in between where it's kind of not climbing and so forth. So, what you said, Brown should attack, should roll attacks and so forth, but she's only getting away here because people are looking at each other to try and close down Paladin, which it's a solid strategy for Brown. She bridges to Soraya Paladin, and that's where something curious happens. And this is the kind of stuff where I'm like, ooh, can people use this? Bredewold attacks to those two and seems to fail to close it immediately, and then drops back and then starts spacing the group. And we saw this earlier in this race, I think somewhere with 14 kilometers to go, when Nivyadoma attacked.
Bredewold fully counted.
Yeah, countered, and there was a group of 4 for a second there.
Yeah.
And Nivyadoma sees Bredewold and his D-Works rider and stops spacing. Is that because they didn't necessarily instantly realize, oh, it's Bredewold?
She sometimes looks, she's like tall and skinny like Vollering, so sometimes I have to double check. But no, I don't know. They just, I think, oh, I can't work with SD Works, but Bredewold's good, but pick your poison.
Yeah.
I'll go work with Bredewold. Now, eventually she'll sit on. And one rider who I think was really strong in this phase, and I would really love to know the strategy, was Marcus on Jumbo. Because I think she would have been strong enough to go with the Brown counter or the Paladin move. But I feel like they were going for the Vos sprint, which fair enough. Didn't she win this race in 21? Because it came back because of Longoborghini. So, but Vos doesn't look as good at the moment either. And so Paladin doesn't work with Brown. They get an 11-second gap into the Kouberg. SD Works, I wouldn't say, are fully lining it out and panicking. Other teams might be pacing a little bit as well. Get to the base of the Kouberg. Brown, Paladin refused to relay. She immediately attacks Brown on the steep part of the Kouberg as predicted, but I guess Brown didn't really have another choice. And although it's crazy where you see where she finishes. And then Paladin's looking good until you see behind Marcus is moving hard at the bottom, and then the inevitable Liana Lippert attack comes from the, like, I swear, La Course, Benji, when that used to exist. She did it when there was a steep base of a climb, all the favorites in their wheel, final climb, Lippert, she's going to attack every time. First mover disadvantage, one would say. And then Marcus closed it down, and Yuvi Domin and Kopecky, Mollman, Vollering, all on the wheels. Kopecky's done nothing this race except put her jacket to the car. Vollering's not done too much either. And Paladin's brought back. Lippert goes again. She gets decent separation because she is a very, very strong rider. And then they get over the top. I was waiting for the Nuvi Doma nuclear counter. They all stop. They see Kopecky in the wheel. This isn't good. Vollering comes back, other side of the road. 5 hard pedal strokes, and she's gone. And that's the race. Perfect strategy from SD Works to don't wait for the sprint. Use the threat of Kopecky's sprint to nullify the other riders. Keep Vollering and Kopecky pretty well protected, and then Vollering launches Cavalli style and win the race.
Exactly. It's a scenario where the second they cross the top of the Kouwberg, SD Works has a very likely chance to win the race, because if they're there with 2, and especially with a Kopecky with a sprint, and even next to that, Vollering was probably the fastest in that group in the first place, because Persico was not in that group. She was hanging a bit further behind. So on paper, if they rode to the line, they would have won this race anyway. But the best way of winning, the most certain way of winning, is going to the line alone. And Vollering did the perfect attack there, and she like spoke into her microphone for a second there before she made the move, and then goes on that side of the road. And at first I was like, this doesn't seem like the fastest attack, but it doesn't need to be a fast attack, because you need a tiny gap only for a Lippert in second position to be on a tiny gap, and then, I can't really close it easily, because if I close it, then I'm going to waste all my chances of winning the sprint in the first place. And then she looks behind and
attacked the whole Kouwberg.
Yeah, exactly. And she looks behind and she sees Niviadoma in the wheel, who then doesn't take over. And then after 5 seconds does take over, but by then it's too late. And especially when you then see the shot behind, where Vollering is basically on the back of a motorbike, where like it wouldn't have mattered, I think, for the outcome of the race, but it's very demoralizing for Group 2.
Yeah. It's just perfect from SD Works. They made the Kopecky-Vollering combo work really well today, so credit to them. They weren't put under too much pressure by a large breakaway or a dangerous group of 4 or 5. It's always 1s and 2s, which are in the end easy to manage on a cold and wet day. I was surprised to see, you think with AVV attacking with 87 Ks to go, fast forward 2 hours, a peloton that big coming into the base of the Kouwberg is pretty surprising, actually. That, the other teams didn't make it a little bit more aggressive. And yeah, if you go back and look at the Kouwberg, one thing to look at, I really want to know is, Vos is dropped. Marcus is in a group of 4, and I don't think both SD Works are there right at the top of the Kouwberg. Marcus is nose breathing, gets into the radio, and is clearly saying, I reckon, what do I do? And Vos is like 30 seconds behind. Instead of, she's not going to win a sprint. Instead of attacking Cavalli style, and that moment, it passes, Vollering attacks, race is over, even though it is tough. Once you get into that phase at the base of the Kouwberg and they're all together, it's virtually impossible to beat SD Works, to be honest. They have 2 of the strongest riders. One's got the best sprint. You're not going to drop them easily. It's sort of before then where you need to change the race a little bit. But the top 10, Vollering wins ahead of her teammate Kopecky, winning the sprint behind for second. Van Anrooy, a nice podium, third. Niviadoma, fourth. Paladin, fifth. Brown ends up finishing sixth because the group 3 came back to group 2, which was stopped. And I think Brown and Georgie were in that group. Georgie finishes 7th. Mullman, 8th. Persico, 9th. Ludwig, 10th. Lebu had been active or at the front for a lot of the Kouwbergs, but then she ended up in way back, finishing 18th. Lippert finished 15th, Benji.
Yep.
After all that, Van Vleuten finished ahead of her. So
shocking, huh?
Yeah, it's surprising, but seems to happen.
And Brown
to her a lot.
Is kind of crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Knowing that she was with Paladin before, and Paladin also 5th. Like,
5th, yeah.
That move actually got them into a position where people bridged to them, and they were able to stick on to that group. And maybe they did a slower Kouwberg than the rest, obviously, because they were already ahead. And that anticipation put them in a position where they could secure this top 6 position, both of them. And Canyon Schramm once again with a 4th and a 5th place. And that's going to keep on happening, I fear, as well, because their riders are good for these moves, for like these rolling attacks and so forth. But if we do have to be honest, these rolling attacks don't often lead to a victory, do they?
Oh, because first of all, the other teams like a UAE will help chase it down. Second of all, except for the Brown exception, like Faulkner needs to bring a friend, or have other Jayco riders attacking. They need to be going with other riders. It's like Omloop. Dylan van Baarle didn't go solo immediately. He brought Milan. He brought Florian Vermeersch and young talented French rider on Arkea Samsic, whose name escapes me right now. So he brought 4, and then eventually 1, 2, 3, Lebert. Luke says Lebert, the beer man. The beer race, Amstel Gold Race. So other teams need to be like, oh, Canyon Schramm are up for it?
Yeah.
Let's join in. Let's put some real pressure on. Let's send Floortje Mackay if she could go. Or Lippert. I would argue Lippert should be moving with... If Nuvia Dome is moving, why isn't Lippert moving at the same phase? It's a higher risk strategy, but she ends 17th anyway, playing it straight up conventionally.
Yep.
So I think teams just got to... When the strength discrepancy between SD Works and the rest, which is unfortunate because when Wiebes is riding like this, it's crazy. Like, she was so good as a pure sprinter last year, but you got to try something a little bit different. That being said, easier said than done. Any young riders impress you here, Benji? The top 10 is pretty well-known names. Van Enrooy just continues to impress, and she's the superstar in the making, I think.
20th place, I would argue, because 20th place is Mijntje Geurts, 19-year-old on Lotto Destiny, but that's also kind of like the only rider that immediately pops up next to Ricarda Bauernfeind in 21st position, but that we kind of expected at this point. She did some work for Canyon Schramm during this race as well, closing moves here and there, but she's also super young, 23, and has proven a lot last year, I think, in the generation team, where she won like left and right and got podiums left and right. I swear half her results last year were podiums, if I recall correctly, in U23 races. But that Mijntje Geurts rider looks to be pretty damn strong, and I recall she was dropping at some point, but she clearly finished pretty strong, 20th in the group of Labou and so forth. But outside of that, the names that we see in that top 27, 28 are really the names you'd expect, I think.
Yeah, Cavalli was a DNF, which is something to note. She obviously won this race and Flesh in a matter of 4 days last year. She's still coming back from injury. She was pretty good at Binder. She was 25th at Brabants. I don't know what happened today. It was a little bit miserable, the conditions, but hopefully she's back in fighting form for Flesh. We'll have the Liège-Bastogne-Liège men and women's preview obviously next week, probably after Liège. Thursday morning it will drop. But for Flesh, Benji, who do you like? Because Cavalli obviously won last year, and then before that, it was Van der Breggen for 7 years in a row. And Cavalli doesn't look too crash hot. So who do we like for it?
I think Vollering is definitely going to be high up. I think top 3 is a must for Demi Vollering in this race. Like last year, we had a long phase in the race where it was a group that was ahead, and I think FDG was the one trying to solve that with Brody Chapman from the peloton. Is there an opportunity to go earlier in Flesh Wallon this year? And I do believe that might be possible, but I feel like it depends on what teams are in there and how they act, because today they clearly acted counterintuitive against other teams that also want to block SD Works from winning the race. And if all those kind of riders in a group together with a Misha Bredewold and so forth, then that group could make it in the same way that in Roubaix it worked out for the Femke Marcus group. And that scenario I do see happening, but if we go straight to La Flèche Wallonne, to the Murehui Strait, then we're looking at similar riders as always, which is Vollering, which is, I think, Lippert for that climb. I think that fits her better. because
Van
it's just
Vleuten
straight to
beat
the
her
top.
last year.
Yes, but Van Vleuten is not at the level she was last year based on what I saw today,
You
in
can
my
tell her.
opinion.
I dare you to tell her.
Tell her in the face?
You
I'll
reckon
make-
Movistar will tell her?
I don't care
Tell
what they
Rifle
tell
Lip
her.
it?
I can say it. Like,
No, but I'm saying the reality is I don't think she'll
I don't
Rifle
think
Lip
they'll.
it.
I don't think so either. But it might not be necessary either. I was a bit disappointed
True.
by Sierra today because she dropped really early in the race.
Yeah. Nivea Doma, big chance. Hopefully she's in good shape. Van Anrooy came like 12th last year and she's improved since then.
Yep.
And she's going to be the leader instead of Elisa Longoborghini, who she probably was doing a little bit of work for last year. So maybe she can pull out a big upset. Otherwise, yeah, it's... Who do I like? Millman came 4th last year, but she was 17 seconds down, but she's freed from the SD Works shackles. I'm going to go Millman for a surprise podium. Winner, I really don't know. Hopefully it's an upset. But Vollering is looking, I don't know. I don't think Vollering's looking overwhelmingly dominant on the climbs themselves. So who knows? But Flesh, that'll be one to watch before Liège next Sunday. But we're going to go knuckle down, watch the men's race now, which has got a couple of hours left, and then we'll be streaming and recording the recap of that straight afterwards. But thanks for joining us for the women's recap. Until then, ciao.